How's it going, lads? It's the bald boomer Biosparks. With TBC Classic coming closer each day and the beta speeding up the hype train, there's going to be a huge upheaval in terms of raid composition, raid spots available, as well as new and returning players ready to storm the Dark Portal, which will lead to many players starting to look for new guilds. Speaking of the beta, I was lucky enough to get access. Make sure you drop a follow to catch me when I'm live on Twitch. So a big question that's been floating around is, what type of guild should I be looking for? And this is a very important question because there are lots of players that end up in the wrong guild simply because their goals and expectations don't match up with the vision and the ethos of the guild that they end up joining. A couple of very common examples are a player who thinks they belong in a hardcore guild, and once they join they realise that they simply can't meet the requirements, expectations and demands of what being part of a hardcore guild involves. Another is a player who thinks they're more casual, and then they realise that they actually don't like raiding with a suboptimal raid composition and playing alongside raiders who don't research the mechanics of boss encounters, as well as a large percentage of the raid not bringing consumables, which leads to slower progress than what they would like. As a result of not understanding what type of guild matches your demands and expectations, it results in disappointment and uncertainty if you can get a raid spot in another guild because you wasted your time networking within a guild that either doesn't want you in their raid team, or you feel that you should be surrounded by more dedicated players, especially if you're playing one of the classes that usually only have one raid spot available. So today we're going to cover the different types of guilds that you'll find in TBC Classic, and how you can get a head start in trying to find a guild that you can call home throughout your time there. If you and some friends are still trying to find somewhere to raid, my guild is currently recruiting on Mograine EU Horde, and you can join our guild Discord in the description below for all the details and apply there. Before I cover the different guild types, I'm going to preface my explanation with one important message. There's a very bad trend that's been prevalent throughout the Classic community, which is trying to label other players negatively who prefer to play in a different way. There's some kind of stigma towards players that like to min-max and play with a hardcore mentality, as well as the opposite where someone makes a post to celebrate their guild bringing down Kilthazard for the first time, even though we're several months into phase 6, and people attempt to ridicule them. This attitude is really cringy and I really don't want to see it in my comments section, and this is coming from an elementary school teacher who has 10-year-old students, and even they have a firm understanding that people enjoy different things and it's entirely up to the individual how they fulfill their enjoyment. So if a 10-year-old can understand this basic concept, I'm sure everyone else can as well. And with that said, let's get into today's video. There are many types of guilds that you'll come across in TBC Classic, although you can generalise them down to about 5 points across the spectrum. We'll start off with hardcore guilds. These guilds can range from world first racers, speedrunning enthusiasts, bringing down world bosses whenever they spawn, or players that are willing to push their characters and the content to its absolute limits. These are a group of players that are dedicated min-maxers. In Classic WoW they would be fully world buffed, running with the best raiding professions and having every aspect of their character to be as optimized as possible. This even includes their ability rotation, race choice, enchants, consumables and talents. If a method is discovered that can shave off a minute from their clear times, then they will be doing what is necessary to achieve that. Needless to say that the expectations and competition within a hardcore guild are incredibly high. This means that if you're part of this guild and you feel that you can skip out on a particular profession or consumable, then it will be noticed and there will be someone ready to take your place if you are seen to not be bringing your best. I'll give you an example. Once the guild I was in stopped raiding Nax, one of the warriors joined a hardcore guild on my server. This warrior has 99 passes across the board, and many of us would think, surely that's good enough. However, the warrior class leader after a raid one night pulled him into a Discord channel to have a chat about his performance. And the topic was that they had analysed his logs and they realised he wasn't using sapper charges and dense dynamite on cooldown during trash pools, and they expected to see a change in the next week's raid. This is the sort of levels of dedication and preparation that are expected in a hardcore guild. A clear example for this in TBC Classic is, regardless of how Blizzard decides to implement leatherworking drums, you better believe that they will be using them for all tiers of raiding, and if you refuse to do so, then you will be first on the list to be replaced. On top of this, when a raider receives a new ring, they will be expected to relearn enchanting and enchant their new rings. I hope those examples really sends the message home that if you are someone who's thinking of participating in the hardcore scene, then you will be expected to go above and beyond in every single regard to optimize the raid as a whole. Next up we have semi-hardcore guilds. Sometimes I feel the name semi-hardcore can be a bit misleading, and guilds that fall into this category don't always enforce the same things. Firstly, a semi-hardcore guild would still focus on clearing the new raiding content within the first week, or at least get very close to doing so. As a result, they will aim to bring an optimal raid composition where possible, but there may be some exceptions depending on how serious they are. When it comes to professions, many will still enforce having leatherworking drums for the most part, although there will definitely be some that don't. However, depending on how difficult Sunwell Plateau will be, they might enforce the drums in the final phase of TBC Classic. As for enchanting rings, I don't believe semi-hardcore guilds will enforce this, since having to completely drop a profession, acquiring all the enchanting materials to skill up every time you get a couple of new rings is definitely entering the hardcore guild territory. As for the raiders, the raid leader would expect his raid team to have read and understood what the boss mechanics are for each encounter beforehand, and be appropriately prepared in terms of consumables, resistance gear, and individual responsibilities that players have within the raid, as well as having the ability to ensure that they don't make big mistakes during boss encounters. In essence, a semi-hardcore guild attempts to clear raiding content at a good pace without going over the top with min-maxing to accommodate players with jobs and families who may not have a huge amount of time available to dedicate to the game, but they still want to clear all the relevant content efficiently. If you're a player who likes to be efficient with your time in the game and want to clear the raiding content with like-minded players who you know will be prepared and play their class or role in an optimal way to create a high-quality atmosphere of raiding, then this is most likely the type of guild that you're looking for. Next up, we have standard guilds. These guilds have a much more relaxed approach to raiding, and their goals can range widely from guild to guild, so it can be a bit difficult to pin down exactly where they stand. Although in general, running an optimal raid composition isn't usually their primary concern. As long as they have the bare essentials of enough tanks and healers and some decent DPS to fill out their raid roster, then they're good to go. These are the types of guilds where you may see quite a large deviation away from the raiding meta. I mean, imagine actually running 2 rogues in a TBC raid. Crazy, right? Standard guilds will still expect their raiders to have their gear enchanted and turn up with essential consumables for boss encounters, since they still intend to progress through the content and see how far they're able to get. They usually have a "we'll get there when we get there" mentality when it comes to raid progression, without any particular rush to reach the finish line. In terms of professions, there usually aren't any particular demands, so if they have leatherworking drums, great. If not, then don't worry about it. So if you're someone who wants to experience raiding content without the expectation or demand to complete it as fast or as optimally as possible, then this is a type of guild that you should consider. The next type of guild are casual guilds. These are the types of guilds that don't really have raiding as their utmost priority, and if they're able to bring 25 players together one week, but not the next, then it's not a problem for them. Raiding is more of a community activity that can create some fun experiences and make the bond between their guild members stronger. There are some casual guilds that do end up completing the content much later down the line, so there are a few casual guilds that may be more raiding orientated, but again, there isn't any particular demand or rush for these guilds to complete the content or run any kind of optimal raid composition. Casual guilds are pretty much just that, for the casual player that can enjoy the game with no strings attached and can interact in whatever the guild has planned for dungeons, raiding, PvP or otherwise. And lastly, we have social guilds. These guilds focus on the social aspects of the game, and if they end up going to a raid, it pretty much is just using the raid setting as a medium for their social activities to have some fun. So don't expect raiding to be any kind of regular activity in these types of guilds. Social guilds focus very much on the community aspect of the game, be that in leveling together, running some dungeons, or even roleplay events. I actually know a few players in hardcore guilds that have ults in social guilds just because they can relax and enjoy the friendly atmosphere and take it easy whilst playing on one of their ults. So if you really want to just enjoy the game at your own pace, not particularly worrying about raiding without any kind of expectations from others, then a social guild can suit you. So finally, how are you going to find these guilds? Well, this is where Discord and websites like Reddit can be your best source. You'll find lots of guilds actively recruiting that normally give a summary or outline of what kind of guild they are, what you can expect from them, and what they expect from you, as well as what days of the week that they plan to raid. So if you want to find the perfect guild for you in TBC Classic and you don't want to leave things up to chance, then you really need to start networking and finding potential guilds that you want to consider joining. Remember, just because you join a guild's Discord does not mean you are bound by some kind of contract to stick with them if you find another guild before launch that you prefer. I'm going to quote a tyrannical ex-guildmaster I had back in Phase 3. At the end of the day, you do you. You'll end up regretting not having taken the time to find a group of like-minded people with the same goals as you if you join guilds that don't fit you as a player. And that is everything for today's video about guilds. I hope you found the information useful in your quest to find a guild that suits you. This is the Bald Boomer Biosparks, signing out. Catch you lads next time.